My name is Elaine, and I'm 41 years old. I've been a single mother for almost 16 years now, ever since Chloe's father left us when she was still small enough to believe that monsters only lived under her bed. I used to think that surviving on my own made me strong, that working two jobs, keeping the lights on and giving Chloe everything she needed meant I was doing things right. But lately, it started to feel like all that strength came at a price I didn't realize I was paying. That morning started like any other. I woke up before dawn, my body moving on autopilot. I made toast, packed Chloe's lunch, and tried to tell myself she'd actually eat it this time. The house felt colder than usual, not just the air, but the silence. There was a time when our mornings were filled with laughter, when she'd follow me around the kitchen asking about my day, teasing me about how I drank too much coffee. But those days felt far away. Like a dream I only half remembered. Lately, Chloe's been different. Distant. Angry in a way I couldn't quite reach. She used to talk to me about everything, school, friends, her favorite shows, but now she barely looks up from her phone. I tell myself it's just a phase, that teenagers are supposed to be moody, but deep down, I know it's more than that. There's something festering beneath the surface, something neither of us knows how to name. I was pouring my own coffee when I heard her bedroom door slam upstairs. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. I sighed, already exhausted before the day even began. "Chloe," I called, trying to sound calm. "We're gonna be late if you don't get moving." She appeared at the top of the stairs a minute later, wearing an expression I'd come to dread, eyes cold, jaw tight, lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm going," she said flatly, brushing past me on her way to the door. I tried to say something kind, to bridge the distance between us, but the words tangled in my throat. "Wait," I blurted out. "You forgot your lunch." She spun around, her hair whipping over her shoulder. "I don't want it," she snapped. "You have to eat something," I said gently. "I said I don't want it, Mom." Her voice rose higher than I expected, sharp enough to cut through the air. My stomach clenched. I could feel my patience slipping. The same old frustration bubbling to the surface. "You can't just keep skipping meals, Chloe." "I worry about you," I said. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "You don't worry about me. You just want to control me. You don't trust me to make a single decision on my own." That hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell her she was being unfair, but before I could speak, she grabbed her backpack and stormed out the door. The sound of it slamming shut behind her rattled the windows. I stood there, frozen, the silence swallowing me whole. I felt the sting of tears, but I refused to let them fall. I told myself I was just tired, that this was normal, that all mothers went through this. But deep down, I knew I'd lost something precious, something I wasn't sure I could ever get back. I cleaned up the kitchen, scrubbing the same spotless counter over and over again just to keep my hands busy. Every clink of the dishes, every hum of the refrigerator felt painfully loud. When I finally sat down with my coffee, the bitterness hit me harder than usual. It wasn't just the taste, it was the emptiness behind it. I spent the rest of the day trying to shake off the argument, but it clung to me like smoke. At work, I smiled when I had to, answered calls, typed reports, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying her words in my head, each one digging deeper. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been controlling. Maybe I'd been so focused on keeping everything together that I forgot how to actually see her. When I finally pulled into the driveway that evening, the house looked the same as always, but it felt different. The lights were on, and through the window, I could see Chloe sitting at the kitchen table. My chest tightened. I wasn't sure what kind of reception I'd get when I walked in. Another argument, another silent wall, or maybe, just maybe, a chance to fix things. I opened the door quietly, bracing myself. Chloe looked up. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I hadn't heard from her in months. "Hey, Mom." Her voice was soft, almost tentative. "Hey," I replied cautiously, hanging up my coat. "Rough day?" She shrugged. "Not really." Then she stood, walked to the counter, and picked something up. When she turned back, she was holding a mug, steam curling from the top, the scent unmistakable. I made you coffee, she said. I blinked, caught off guard. You made me coffee? She nodded, her face unreadable. You always look so tired. Thought you might need it. My heart swelled with relief, a flicker of hope lighting in my chest. Maybe this was her way of apologizing, of trying to mend things between us. I smiled and took the cup, my hands brushing hers for a moment. Thank you, sweetie, I said. She just nodded and sat back down, watching me. I lifted the mug to my lips and took a sip. It was hot, too hot and bitter in a way I couldn't quite place. I forced a smile, pretending not to notice. Tastes good, I lied. Her eyes didn't leave me. She just sat there, quiet, almost studying me. A strange unease crawled up my spine, something instinctive and primal whispering that something wasn't right. But I brushed it off, telling myself I was just imagining things. After all, she'd made me coffee that had to mean she still cared, right? When I came home later that day and saw Chloe waiting for me with a strange calmness and a cup of coffee, I felt something I couldn't quite explain. You said, Section 2J Revenge Stories said, Section 2870 words. The argument that went too far. It started like any other disagreement, but it quickly became something much darker. The night before that strange cup of coffee, Chloe and I had one of the worst arguments we'd ever had. It's strange how words can cut deeper than anything physical, how something as simple as a tone, a glance, or a sentence can build an invisible wall between two people who used to be inseparable. It all began with a phone call from her school counselor. I was at work, halfway through a pile of reports, when the number flashed across my screen. The counselor's voice was calm but heavy with concern. She said Chloe had missed 3 classes that week and had been caught wandering off campus. I felt my stomach sink. Chloe had always been a good student, bright and curious. This was so unlike her. When I got home that evening, she was in her room with her headphones on, the music loud enough to shake the floorboards. I knocked, trying to stay calm. Chloe, can we talk? She didn't respond. I knocked again. I talked to Mrs. Johnson today, I said. She called me from school. The music cut off abruptly. Then, her voice, sharp as glass. Why do you always have to butt into everything? I opened the door, and she glared at me from her bed. Because I'm your mother, and it's my job to make sure you're okay, I said, struggling to keep my tone even. She rolled her eyes. I'm fine. You don't have to call my school every time I breathe. I didn't call them. Chloe, they called me, I said. You've been skipping classes. What's going on? Nothing's going on. She snapped, standing up. You just can't stand that I have a life outside of you. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. That's not fair, I said. I've done everything for you. I work double shifts, I come home exhausted, and all I ask is that you take school seriously. Oh my God, here we go again, she said, throwing her hands up. You're always the victim, aren't you? Poor mom, working so hard, sacrificing everything. Do you even hear yourself? My voice rose before I could stop it. Don't talk to me like that, Chloe. I'm trying to help you. Help me? She said, her voice cracking with bitterness. You don't help me, you control me. You tell me what to wear, who to hang out with, what I can or can't do. You treat me like I'm some little kid who can't think for herself. I stared at her, stunned. That's not true, I whispered. But even as I said it, I felt the sting of guilt. Maybe I had been controlling, out of fear more than anything else. I'd built my life around protecting her, but maybe I'd been smothering her instead. I just want what's best for you, I said softly. She laughed bitterly. No. You want what's best for you. You want to look like the perfect mom. The one who has it all under control. You don't care what I want. Her words hit me harder than any slap could. I could feel my face heat up, my chest tightening. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. I love you, Chloe, but you're acting completely out of line. You're being selfish and, selfish, she interrupted, her voice trembling now. You're calling me selfish? I froze. She took a step forward, eyes brimming with tears that she was fighting to hold back. You don't even know what I've been going through, she said. You don't see me, Mom. You don't try to see me. You're just too busy being right all the time. Something inside me snapped. I didn't mean to, but the words flew out before I could stop them. Maybe if you weren't so ungrateful, I could see you. The moment the word ungrateful left my mouth, I wanted to take it back. Her face went blank, like every emotion drained out of her all at once. She stood there for a long, heavy second before whispering, "You'll regret saying that, Mom." Her voice was quiet, almost calm, and that scared me more than her shouting ever did. Then she turned and walked upstairs, her steps slow and deliberate, each one echoing through the house like a countdown. I sat there at the kitchen table long after she was gone, my hands pressed against my temples, my heart pounding. I told myself I'd go upstairs, that I'd apologize, but I couldn't. I was too proud, too angry, too hurt. Instead, I stared at the empty chair across from me, the one she used to sit in every morning while we shared breakfast and laughed about nothing at all. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the argument in my head, the look on her face when I called her ungrateful. I'd seen disappointment in her eyes before, but this was different. This was colder. I got up around midnight, thinking maybe I could still go to her room and make things right. I stood outside her door, listening. There was silence on the other side, no music, no crying, nothing, just the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I almost knocked. Almost. But then I turned and went back to my room, convincing myself that sleep would fix everything. It didn't. The next morning, the house was quiet again, unnaturally so. I told myself she was just sleeping in, that we'd talk later, that maybe she'd already forgiven me. I had no idea that while I sat there sipping my morning coffee and staring at her closed door, she was already planning something I never could have imagined. I didn't realize then that her silence would be far more dangerous than her words. You said, Section 3J Revenge Stories, said Section 3890 words, the unexpected peace offering. The next morning, the smell of coffee filled the house and it wasn't mine. I remember the moment vividly, the way small, ordinary details can stick in your memory forever. The air was heavy with the scent of roasted beans, sweet and earthy, curling through the hallway and into my bedroom. For a split second, I thought I was dreaming. Chloe never woke up before me, let alone made coffee. I got out of bed slowly, still groggy, wondering if maybe I'd left the machine on overnight. When I walked into the kitchen, I froze. There she was, Chloe, standing. Steam rose from both, and her face looked calm in a way that didn't quite match how tense things had been between us. "Morning," she said softly. Her voice was almost cheerful, but there was something off. I couldn't put my finger on it. "Morning," I replied, cautious but relieved that she was even speaking to me. "You're up early." She shrugged, offering me one of the mugs. "I made you coffee. Thought you could use it before work." I blinked, taken aback. "You made me coffee?" "Yeah," she said, smiling faintly. "You always look tired. Figured I'd help out for once." It was strange hearing those words from her. Kindness had become rare between us lately. For a moment, my heart softened. Maybe last night's fight had hit her as hard as it hit me. Maybe this was her way of apologizing. "Thank you, honey," I said, forcing a smile as I took the mug. "That's really sweet." She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, resting her chin on her hand, watching as I took my first sip. The taste was wrong. It was coffee, yes, but something about it was strange, too bitter, almost metallic. I frowned for half a second, then quickly masked it with another sip, pretending it was fine. I didn't want to ruin the moment. "Good?" she asked, eyes still fixed on me. "It's strong," I said with a little laugh. "But, yeah, good, thank you." She nodded, satisfied, and leaned back in her chair. "I can make it every morning if you want." "That'd be nice," I replied, though my stomach felt uneasy. The way she said it, it sounded more like a statement than an offer. We sat in silence for a while. I tried to make small talk, asking about school, her friends, her plans for the weekend. She answered briefly, politely, But there was still a distance in her tone, like she was rehearsing normalcy rather than feeling it. After a few minutes, she pushed her mug aside. "I'm not really hungry," she said. "You should eat something," I said automatically, the mother in me taking over. She gave me a small, tired smile. "Maybe later." Then she got up, picked up her cup, and dumped what little was left of it in the sink. I watched her, a strange chill running down my spine. "Chloe," I said gently, "about last night." She stopped, her back to me. "It's fine," she said quietly. "Forget about it." "I didn't mean what I said," I continued, my voice breaking slightly. "You're not ungrateful." I was angry, and I said something cruel. "I'm sorry." She turned then, her expression unreadable. "You always say sorry, Mom," she said. "But nothing ever changes." That hit harder than she could have known. Before I could respond, she walked past me and went upstairs, her footsteps soft but final. I sat there for a while, staring into the dark swirl of my coffee. The bitter taste lingered on my tongue, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, not just about her words, but about that cup. I took another hesitant sip, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she used too much coffee powder. Or maybe the milk had gone bad. But the aftertaste was strange, almost chemical. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was nothing, but the more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. By the time I left for work, my stomach felt uneasy, and there was a faint dizziness that came and went in waves. I brushed it off as stress. I had been under a lot of it lately, our fights, my job, the bills piling up. I told myself I just needed rest. Throughout the day, though, I kept thinking about that cup of coffee, about the way she'd watched me drink it, about how she hadn't touched hers at all. Every time the thought crept in, I pushed it away, hating myself for even imagining something so dark. She was my daughter, my baby. She wouldn't. No, she couldn't. When I came home that evening, the house was quiet again. Her bedroom door was shut, and the lights were off. I peeked in just to check on her. She was lying in bed, facing the wall, her breathing slow and steady. I wanted to reach out, to touch her shoulder, to tell her again how sorry I was. But something held me back. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Instead, I went to the kitchen to rinse out the mug she'd used that morning. As I turned on the faucet, a faint, unfamiliar smell rose from the sink, sharp, almost medicinal. I frowned, sniffing again. It wasn't coffee, it was something else, something chemical. My heart thudded in my chest. I ran hot water, washing the cup thoroughly, convincing myself I was imagining things. But even after the mug was clean, the smell lingered faintly in the air, stubborn and sour. I leaned against the counter, my hands shaking slightly. Maybe she'd spilled something. Maybe she'd used the wrong container. There had to be a simple explanation. Still, that unease stayed with me, crawling beneath my skin. I told myself I'd ask her about it the next morning, gently, without accusation. Maybe it would open the door to another conversation, maybe even to forgiveness. But when I looked at the cup one last time before placing it on the drying rack, I couldn't shake the image of her face as she'd watched me drink from it. Calm, still, almost expectant. Something about her gaze made me uneasy, but I couldn't yet place why. "You said," Section 4J Revenge Stories said, Section 4860 words. The taste I couldn't forget all day at work. I couldn't stop thinking about that bitter taste. It lingered at the back of my throat like a memory I couldn't swallow. No matter how much water I drank or how many mints I chewed, it stayed there, a reminder of something I couldn't explain. I kept telling myself it was just bad coffee, that Chloe probably didn't know how to make it right. Still, every time I closed my eyes, I could see her expression from that morning, calm. Too calm. As if she'd been waiting for me to drink it. At first, I tried to push the thought away. I had reports to finish, deadlines to meet, a boss breathing down my neck. There was no room in my day for paranoia. But as the hours passed, my body felt off. My stomach churned, and there was a faint metallic taste in my mouth that wouldn't go away. My hands trembled slightly when I tried to type. Maybe it was anxiety. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe something else. Around lunchtime, my coworker Dana noticed. "Elaine, are you okay? You look pale," she said, her brow furrowed. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a small smile. "Just didn't sleep much." She nodded but didn't look convinced. "You should take it easy. You've been running yourself ragged." If only she knew. It wasn't work that was wearing me down, it was my own home. My own daughter. The guilt of last night's argument still gnawed at me. Maybe this was my punishment, feeling sick to my stomach from all the things left unsaid. When I finally clocked out and got into my car, the exhaustion hit me all at once. My head pounded. I sat there for a few minutes before starting the engine, breathing deeply, trying to steady myself. I told myself that when I got home, I'd talk to Chloe properly this time. No anger, no pride, just honesty. The drive home was quiet. The late afternoon sun stretched across the sky, and the streets looked golden, peaceful, almost mocking in their normalcy. I turned onto our street, the same one I'd driven down hundreds of times, but it felt different now, heavier, as if the house at the end of the block was holding its breath. When I stepped inside, the air was still. Chloe wasn't in the living room. The TV was off. I called her name softly, but there was no answer. I noticed her school bag tossed carelessly by the stairs, and her shoes kicked aside. Typical. But something else caught my attention, a faint smell drifting from the sink. Same chemical scent I'd noticed before. I walked over slowly, my heartbeat quickening. The mugs from that morning were still sitting there. One was mine, the one I'd used. I picked it up, hesitating for a moment. The inside looked stained darker than usual, almost oily. I sniffed it, and my stomach lurched. It wasn't just coffee. There was something else. Something bitter and unfamiliar. I set the mug down quickly, my hands trembling. "No," I whispered to myself. "You're imagining things. She wouldn't." But my mind wouldn't stop racing. What if she had? What if she'd done something to the coffee? The thought alone made me feel sick. Not just physically, but emotionally. What kind of mother even thinks that about her child? I stood there for a long time, staring at that cup like it held the answer to every mistake I'd ever made. Then I shook my head, forcing myself to move. I poured some water over it, rinsing it out, trying to wash away both the residue and my own dark suspicions. Still, that smell wouldn't go away. I poured in dish soap, scrubbed harder, until the glass almost squeaked. I told myself it was over, that I was being ridiculous. I went upstairs to check on Chloe. Her door was closed, as always. I knocked gently. "Chloe?" No answer. "It's me, honey. Can we talk?" Still silence. I waited a few seconds, then sighed and went back downstairs. I told myself she was just tired, that she needed space. That's what all the parenting articles said, right? Give them space. That night, I couldn't eat much. I reheated some soup, but my appetite was gone. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring it absently, glancing now and then at the coffee mug drying beside the sink. Every time my eyes landed on it, a chill went down my spine. I tried watching TV to distract myself, but nothing held my attention. My thoughts kept circling back to that coffee, to Chloe's eyes, to the faint smile she gave me when she handed me the cup. By the time I went to bed, my head was throbbing. I told myself I'd throw away the mug in the morning, just to be safe. But sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house made me jump. At one point, I thought I heard her walking down the hallway outside my room, her footsteps slow and deliberate. I held my breath, waiting for her to knock, but she never did. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of coffee-dark liquid swirling in a mug, turning thicker and thicker until it looked like oil. And then, just before I woke, I saw something at the bottom of it, a grainy, powdery residue clinging to the sides. I shot up in bed, heart pounding, covered in sweat. The room was still dark, but I knew what I had to do. I slipped out of bed quietly and went to the kitchen. The mug was still on the counter where I'd left it. I turned on the light, my hands trembling, and picked it up. I tilted it toward the sink, and that's when I saw it. At the very bottom, just below the coffee stain, there was a thin, dusty layer of something pale and granular. Not sugar, not creamer, something else. I scraped it gently with my fingernail, and a faint, chalky texture rubbed off onto my skin. My breath caught in my throat. Pills. It looked like crushed pills. I dropped the mug into the sink, the sound echoing through the quiet kitchen. My mind went blank, my pulse roaring in my ears. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. That night, I poured the remaining coffee down the drain, and what I saw at the bottom froze me in place. You said, Section 5J Revenge. Stories said, Section 5870 words. The residue in the cup. There was a strange, grainy residue sticking to the bottom of the mug. Stared at it under the kitchen light, my breath catching as the reality sank in. The pale, powdery grains clung stubbornly to the porcelain, swirling faintly in the water as I tilted the cup. It wasn't coffee grounds. It was something else entirely, something that had no place being there. For a moment, I just stood frozen, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. The only sound in the room was the faint dripping of the faucet. I forced myself to take a closer look. The residue was uneven, like something had been crushed unevenly and half dissolved. My mind immediately went to the medicine cabinet upstairs. I didn't want to think it, didn't want to let that thought form fully, but it was there, heavy and unavoidable. I hurried up the stairs, my heart thudding in my chest so loudly it almost drowned out the creaking floorboards beneath my feet. The bathroom light flickered on, harsh and cold. I pulled open the cabinet door and froze. There it was, an open bottle of my prescription anti-anxiety pills, lying sideways, a few tablets missing. My vision blurred for a moment as my brain tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I counted them. 3 gone. I hadn't taken any in weeks. My stomach twisted so violently I had to steady myself against the sink. No, I whispered. No, she wouldn't. But as much as I wanted to deny it, the pieces were starting to align in ways that terrified me. The bitter, metallic taste in the coffee, the residue in the mug, the missing pills. My knees buckled, and I sat down on the bathroom floor, hugging myself tightly. Tears stung my eyes, not from anger or betrayal but from confusion and disbelief. My own daughter, the child I had carried, fed, loved, couldn't possibly mean to hurt me. She was just a teenager, emotional, impulsive. This had to be a mistake. Maybe she'd been experimenting, maybe she'd just been curious. Maybe it was something else entirely. But deep down, under the rationalizations and desperate excuses, a darker truth was taking shape, a truth I didn't want to face. I stayed on that bathroom floor for a long time, staring blankly at the tiles. My mind replayed every interaction, every argument, every cold stare. The night before she'd said, "You'll regret saying that." I had brushed it off as teenage anger. But now those words took on a new, horrifying meaning. I finally stood up and splashed cold water on my face. I needed to stay calm, to think clearly. Marching into her room and accusing her would only push her further away if this was even what I feared it was. If I was wrong, I'd destroy whatever was left of our relationship. If I was right, I didn't finish that thought. I couldn't. When I walked past her room, I heard faint movement. The light was off, but I could tell she was still awake. I stopped outside her door, my hand hovering near the handle. I wanted to go in, to ask her directly, to look her in the eyes and know the truth. But my hand wouldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, listening to the sound of her quiet breathing through the door. After a moment, I turned away. I went back downstairs, grabbed the mug from the sink, and placed it carefully in a plastic bag. I don't know why, maybe part of me wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to believe my imagination wasn't running wild. I sat at the table for hours, staring at that bag, thinking about calling someone, my sister maybe, or even the police. But every time I imagined their reactions, shame flooded through me. What would I even say? I think my daughter put something in my coffee? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I was. Maybe this was just stress. At some point, I glanced at the clock. It was past midnight. The house was silent except for the ticking of the kitchen clock, each second echoing like a heartbeat. I decided I'd confront her in the morning, but gently. No accusations. I'd just ask questions, see how she reacted. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the coffee swirling in the cup again. The residue clinging to the sides. The pale dust like a warning I hadn't wanted to see. My dreams were fragmented and feverish. I woke up drenched in sweat more than once, my heart hammering as if I'd been running. When morning came, the sunlight felt cruelly bright, cutting through the curtains like blades. I could hear movement downstairs, Chloe, clattering dishes in the kitchen. The smell of toast drifted up the stairs, warm and comforting in a way that made my chest ache. I got up slowly, every muscle stiff. My mind was at war with itself. One half of me screamed to go down there and hug her, to forget everything and believe this was all some horrible misunderstanding. The other half whispered that something had changed in her, something dangerous and unpredictable. When I walked into the kitchen, she turned and smiled. "Morning, Mom," she said brightly. Too brightly. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound normal, but my voice came out hoarse. She held up the coffee pot. "Want me to make you some?" My stomach turned. "No thanks, I'm good." "Really?" she asked, tilting her head. "You always have coffee in the morning." "Not today," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm in a rush." She shrugged and poured herself a cup instead. I watched her, every small movement, every flicker of expression. She didn't drink it right away, just stirred it, staring into the dark liquid. I grabbed my purse and keys, pretending to check my phone. "I'll see you later, okay?" She looked up and smiled again. "Okay, Mom, have a good day." I walked out of the house, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I got into my car, I sat there for a long time before starting the engine. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what scared me more, the idea that Chloe had done something terrible, or the fact that, deep down, I was beginning to believe she had. The next day, I pretended everything was normal, but I started watching her every move. "You said, Section 6J Revenge Stories said, Section 6890 words. Watching and waiting, living under the same roof as someone you suspect, it changes everything." The house didn't feel like home anymore. Every sound, every quiet movement seemed amplified. The creak of Chloe's door, the clink of a spoon in a mug, even her footsteps on the stairs made my heart jump. I found myself listening for things I didn't even know I was afraid of. Every instinct in me wanted to believe I was overreacting, but there was a sharp edge to everything she did now, a tension I couldn't ignore. For the next few days, I tried to act normal. I smiled when she spoke, nodded when she mentioned school, and even laughed when she told me a half-hearted joke over dinner. But behind every word, every glance, I was studying her, looking for signs of something darker. She seemed cheerful, too cheerful, as though she were performing normalcy instead of living it. She'd started helping around the house more, washing dishes, doing laundry, even making my meals. Before, I would have been thrilled by this sudden maturity, but now, it terrified me. I couldn't look at a plate of food without wondering what she'd put in it. The smell of coffee, once comforting, now made my stomach tighten. One morning, she came into my room with a cup of tea instead of coffee. "I thought you might want something lighter today," she said, her tone sweet and innocent. "Thanks," I murmured, taking it from her. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced a smile. I waited until she left the room before I carried the cup quietly to the bathroom. I poured the tea down the sink, the amber liquid swirling away, leaving behind the faintest grainy residue at the bottom. The same residue. My throat went dry. I rinsed the cup quickly, my hands shaking. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Instead, I just stared at my reflection in the mirror, pale, tired, and hollow-eyed. What had happened to us? How had it come to this? That night, I started collecting things, samples of the drinks she made, notes of the times she offered them, even photos on my phone. It felt absurd, paranoid. But I needed something concrete, something to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. Still, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. What would I even say? "Chloe, are you trying to hurt me?" The thought alone broke me. I'd spent my life protecting her. I'd given up everything so she could feel safe. And now I couldn't even feel safe in my own home. Days blurred together. Chloe grew more attentive, more affectionate in strange, uneven bursts. Sometimes she'd hug me unexpectedly, her arms tight, her face buried in my shoulder. I'd stand there stiffly, unsure if it was love or guilt that made her cling to me. Other times, I'd catch her watching me quietly from across the room. One evening, I came home to find dinner already made: spaghetti and garlic bread, her favorite. She greeted me with a smile. "Thought I'd surprise you," she said. "That's nice," I replied, setting down my purse. My eyes darted to the plates, to the wine glasses filled with water, to the sauce glistening under the kitchen light. She sat down eagerly. "I even made your plate for you. Come on, sit." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the back of the chair. "I'm not very hungry tonight," I said. Her smile faltered. "You've been saying that a lot lately." "I know," I replied. "Just work stress." She nodded slowly, her eyes lingering on me for a few seconds too long. Then she shrugged and began eating her own food. I excused myself, pretending to grab something from my bag, but instead, I slipped my phone out and quietly took a photo of the untouched plate she'd prepared for me. Later that night, when she went upstairs, I dumped the contents of my plate into a plastic container and hid it in the fridge. I didn't even know what I planned to do with it, maybe take it to a lab. Maybe just keep it as proof. Proof of what, though? That my daughter might be trying to harm me? Even thinking those words made my stomach twist in guilt. Still, I couldn't ignore what I was seeing. The missing pills, the strange taste, the residue, her eerie calmness, all of it painted a picture I didn't want to look at. A few days later, I made an appointment with a family counselor. I didn't tell Chloe. I just said I had an extra shift at work. I thought maybe a professional could help me figure out how to fix this before it spiraled any further. I didn't want to lose her, no matter what she'd done. But the night before the appointment, I noticed something new. Something that sent a fresh wave of dread through me. I went into the kitchen to get some water, and there she was, sitting at the table with her back to me. The light from her phone illuminated her face, and I saw something in her expression that made my blood run cold. She was smiling, but not like someone texting a friend. It was a small, satisfied smile. One that didn't reach her eyes. Her phone screen glowed white, and though I couldn't see exactly what she was reading, I caught a few words reflected in the glass of the kitchen window. Side effects. Lethal. Dosage. I froze, barely breathing. My heart slammed against my ribs. I backed away slowly, afraid she'd hear me. That night, I couldn't close my eyes. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. I could hear her pacing her room sometimes, moving back and forth. When the sun finally came up, I told myself I'd had enough. I couldn't keep living like this, walking on eggshells, second-guessing everything. I needed to know for sure. I needed the truth. But before we could even go, I discovered something that shattered everything I thought I knew. "You said..." Section 7J Revenge Stories said. Section 7870 words. The hidden drawer. I was cleaning her room when I accidentally found the truth. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, one of those quiet days when the house feels too still. I told myself I wasn't snooping. I just wanted to tidy up a little, make her bed, maybe fold her laundry as a peace offering before our counseling appointment. But deep down, I knew I was looking for something, anything to calm the storm inside me. Her room smelled faintly of her vanilla-scented lotion and the artificial sweetness of perfume. I opened her curtains, letting the sunlight spill across her desk. Her books were scattered, her notebooks filled with doodles and fragments of writing. I picked one up and flipped through it. Poems, angry scribbles, words like hate, betrayal, and lies scratched across the margins. My chest tightened. I was about to set it down when my knee brushed against something under her vanity. a hollow sound. I crouched, moving a pile of clothes aside, and there it was, a small, narrow drawer built into the underside of the vanity. The wood grain didn't quite match the rest of it, as if it had been added later. I tugged on it, but it didn't budge. After a moment, I found the edge of a tiny latch hidden beneath the lip of the table. My pulse quickened as it clicked open. Inside were things that shouldn't have been there. Empty pill bottles, my bottles tucked neatly into the back, crushed powder wrapped in tissues, a spoon, and beneath all that, a torn photograph of me, ripped right down the middle. My face stared back from one half, smiling in a way that felt grotesque now. My hands started shaking as I lifted the pieces. Beneath them was a folded note. My stomach dropped when I recognized her handwriting. I hesitated before unfolding it, my fingers trembling. No explanation, no signature, just those 9 words, and uneven, angry strokes. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor. For a few long seconds, all I could hear was my own breathing, shallow, panicked. I pressed a hand to my mouth, fighting the urge to scream. My mind replayed every strange smile, every too sweet word, every cup of coffee and tea she'd handed me over the past week. The air in the room seemed to thin. I couldn't think straight. I wanted to run. To get out of that house. To call someone, anyone, but I couldn't move. My own daughter had written those words. My own daughter had been planning something. I forced myself to read the note again, hoping I had misunderstood. But there was no mistaking the meaning. She was angry, hurt in ways I hadn't seen, hadn't wanted to see. She deserves to feel what I felt. What had she felt? Pain? Abandonment? Betrayal? I thought of her father. The way he'd left when she was 6. How she'd cried herself to sleep for weeks. I'd always blamed him, told myself I'd done everything I could to protect her from his absence. But maybe in trying so hard to shield her, I'd built a wall she couldn't break through. Maybe she'd spent years drowning behind it. I picked up one of the bottles from the drawer. It still had a faint trace of powder inside. My breath hitched. I recognized it immediately. It was from my old prescription, the one I'd hidden months ago after realizing how many I had left. I hadn't remembered taking that many. Now I knew why. My vision blurred with tears. "Oh, Chloe," I whispered. "What did I do to you?" I sat there for what felt like forever, my hands trembling, the sunlight shifting across the floor as the afternoon wore on. Part of me wanted to burn the note, to erase the proof, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But the other part, the terrified, desperate part, knew I couldn't ignore this anymore. I needed to understand why. I needed to know what she meant, what she'd been feeling, what she might still be planning. Slowly, I put everything back the way I found it, the bottles, the powder, the note carefully sliding the drawer shut until it clicked. Then I stood, my knees weak, and left the room as quietly as I'd entered. Downstairs, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my hands. My mind was racing. Should I confront her now? Wait until the counselor's appointment tomorrow? Call the police? No police. She was my daughter. My little girl. I couldn't treat her like a criminal. But I couldn't just pretend everything was fine anymore. If she truly meant to hurt me, I needed to know how far she'd go. I needed to see it in her eyes. That evening, I made dinner like usual: chicken, rice, and vegetables. My hands shook as I chopped the onions, but I forced myself to focus, to act normal. When she came downstairs, she looked at me like nothing had happened. "Smells good," she said, sitting at the table. I smiled weakly. "Thanks." We ate in silence. Every time her fork clinked against her plate, I felt a jolt in my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about that drawer, that note, that broken photograph. After dinner, I told her I was going to bed early. She nodded and went to her room, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words echoing in my mind. She deserves to feel what I felt. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I knew one thing: it wasn't over. If I confronted her directly, she'd lie. If I avoided it, she'd think I was weak. I needed a plan. Something to make her show me the truth, to see just how far this had gone. The next morning, as I listened to her moving around downstairs, I made a decision. It was reckless, maybe even dangerous, but I couldn't bear the uncertainty anymore. I would test her. I would give her a chance to show me what she was really capable of. That night, I decided to test her to see how far she was willing to go. You said, Section 8, J. Revenge Stories said. Section 8860. The test. The next morning, I told her I wasn't feeling well and asked her to make me some tea. It was a quiet, gray morning, one of those days where the sky feels heavy and the world seems to hold its breath. My body ached from lack of sleep, and my heart beat faster than normal, even as I tried to sound calm. I had spent the whole night going over every possible scenario, every potential outcome. What if I was wrong? What if she was just a hurt teenager acting out? But what if I wasn't wrong? What if she truly meant to harm me? I couldn't take the not knowing anymore. I had to see it for myself. When I came downstairs, Chloe was already in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled faintly when she saw me. "You're up late," she said. "I didn't sleep much," I admitted, rubbing my temple. "I think I might be coming down with something." Her smile softened. "You want me to make you some tea?" "Actually," I said carefully, pretending to think, "Yeah, that would be nice." "Okay," she said, setting her phone down and moving toward the counter. "Perfect," I replied, watching her closely. She filled the kettle and set it on the stove. The faint whistle of steam filled the silence. My hands were cold despite the warmth of the room. I tried to look casual, leaning against the counter, pretending to check the mail, but my eyes followed every movement she made. She reached up to the cabinet for the tea bags, her hand trembling just slightly. Then she glanced toward the corner of the counter, the same place where she'd once prepared my coffee. My stomach twisted. She opened a drawer, pulled out a spoon, and stirred the tea after pouring the hot water. I noticed the way she glanced toward me, quick and cautious, as though making sure I wasn't paying attention. But I was. Every detail burned into my memory, the sound of metal against porcelain, the faint clink of something hitting the spoon before it disappeared beneath the liquid. "Here," she said finally, turning toward me, holding the mug with both hands. "Careful, it's hot." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, taking it with what I hoped was a steady hand. My voice sounded normal, calm even. But my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. She sat down across from me, her eyes flicking to the mug every few seconds. "You should drink it before it gets cold," she said quietly. "I will," I murmured, pretending to blow on it. The steam curled up, carrying that same faintly bitter smell I'd begun to dread. I took one shallow sip, just enough to wet my lips but not enough to swallow. Then I set the mug down carefully, and smiled. "It's good," I lied. "Yeah?" she asked, her tone light. But her fingers tapped nervously against the table. "Yeah," I said again. "You're getting good at this." She smiled faintly, but there was no warmth behind it. It was a tight, forced expression, one that didn't reach her eyes. I felt a wave of sadness then, almost stronger than the fear. How had we come to this point, where I was pretending to drink tea that my daughter might have poisoned? After a few moments, I stood up. "I'm going to go rest," I said, carrying the mug with me. "Thank you, baby." She nodded. "Hope you feel better." When I reached the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against it, my breathing shaky. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror, pale, anxious, desperate. I lifted the mug, hesitated for only a second, and then poured it slowly into a clear glass from the cabinet. The tea swirled, golden and translucent, until the last of it trickled out. That's when I saw it, the same faint residue at the bottom. Pale, chalky grains that didn't belong there. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. I clutched the counter, the truth, slamming into me like cold water. My daughter had done it again. My mind raced with questions I didn't know how to answer. Why? What was she trying to make me feel? Was she trying to scare me, hurt me, kill me? Or was this some twisted cry for help? My body went numb, but my thoughts were sharp, slicing through the disbelief. I couldn't let her know I knew, not yet. I needed to stay calm, to stay in control, even if every part of me was screaming inside. I rinsed out the glass and the mug, making sure no trace was left. Then I filled the cup with plain water, the same temperature as before, and carried it back to the kitchen. When I walked in, she looked up quickly. "Did you finish it?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes searching mine. I smiled softly and took a sip of the water, swallowing deliberately. "Yes," I said. "It helped, thank you." She exhaled a small, quiet breath, one I might have missed if I hadn't been listening for it. It wasn't relief, it was disappointment. She tried to hide it, but I saw the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes flicked to the empty cup and then away again. That expression told me everything I needed to know. A silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to grab her and shake the truth out of her. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I smiled again and said softly, "You really are such a thoughtful girl, Chloe." She looked at me for a moment, her expression unreadable, and then she smiled back. But her eyes stayed cold. As I turned and walked upstairs, every step felt heavier than the last. I could still feel her gaze on me, following me up the stairs. When I reached my room, I closed the door and locked it. Then I sat on the floor, holding my head in my hands. The world tilted around me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. My daughter, the child I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for, was trying to hurt me. The look of disappointment on her face told me everything I needed to know. "You said, Section 9J Revenge." Stories said, Section 9870 words. Breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I had to confront her. After that morning, I felt like I was living in a movie I couldn't escape from. Every sound in the house felt threatening, every silence louder than it should have been. I moved through the days like a ghost, my nerves strung so tight they hummed. I stopped sleeping properly, stopped eating much. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing her footsteps down the hall, wondering if she was standing outside my door. By the third night, I couldn't do it anymore. My body felt like it was vibrating from the inside out. I needed to face her, to make her say the words, to know the truth even if it destroyed me. I waited until evening, when she came home from a friend's house. She was humming softly, her hair pulled into a ponytail, her backpack slung carelessly over her shoulder. She looked so normal, so much like the little girl who used to skip through the front door after school, telling me about her day, that for a brief second I almost forgot. "Hey, Mom," she said, glancing at me as she slipped off her shoes. "Chloe," I said quietly, "can we talk for a minute?" She looked at me, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. Sure. Sit down," I said, motioning toward the living room. My tone was calm. Too calm. I think that's what made her pause before obeying. She sat on the couch, crossing her legs, her posture defensive. I sat across from her, my heart pounding in my throat. "I know," I said softly. Her eyebrows knitted together. "Know what?" "About the coffee," I said. "The tea, the pills." She froze. For a heartbeat, the world felt completely still. Her face went pale, her lips parting slightly as if she couldn't decide whether to deny it or confess. Then she laughed, a shaky, nervous sound. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Chloe," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay composed. "I found the bottles, the powder, the note." The laughter stopped. She looked away, her jaw tightening. "You went through my stuff?" I didn't answer that. "What were you trying to do to me?" I asked. Her eyes snapped to mine then, full of fire. "I wasn't trying to do anything. You don't understand." "Then help me understand," I pleaded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been putting crushed pills in my drinks." Her face crumpled for a moment, and she looked down at her hands. Then, suddenly, she started to cry. "You ruined my life. she said between sobs. You took everything from me. The words hit me like a slap. What are you talking about? Chloe, I've done everything for you. No! She shouted, cutting me off. Her tears turned to anger so fast it made my stomach twist. You didn't do everything for me. You did everything for you. You wanted to be the perfect mom, the one who could say, "Look at me, I raised her all by myself." You didn't care what I wanted. That's not true, I said weakly, though part of me wondered if she believed it more than I did. You don't get it, do you? She said, standing now, pacing the floor. You've always treated me like a child. You make every decision, control every move. You don't trust me, you never have. Her voice cracked, and for a second I saw something raw pain, not hatred. I reached out instinctively. Sweetheart, please, just talk to me. Tell me what's really going on. She stopped pacing, her shoulders heaving. When she turned to face me again, her face had changed. The anger was still there, but beneath it was something else, hurt, confusion, fear. You kept him from me, she said quietly. My stomach dropped. Who? Dad, she whispered. You told me he left us, that he didn't care. But that's not true, is it? I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Chloe. She took a shaky breath. He told me what really happened. My throat went dry. What did he tell you? She hesitated, watching me carefully, like she was waiting for me to slip up. He said you ruined his life, that you drove him away, that you made him leave us. I blinked, stunned. He told you that? She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. He said you lied to me, that you told me he was a bad person so I'd hate him. That's why he couldn't come back. My hands began to tremble. When did he tell you this? Months ago, she said, her voice breaking. We've been talking, online. He found me. The room started to spin. He found you? How, Chloe? She looked away. Through social media. He messaged me under a different name at first. Then he told me who he was. He said you wouldn't let him see me, that you made up lies about him. I felt sick. Chloe, no, you don't understand. Your father, he's not who you think he is. He left because… Stop, she yelled. You're lying again. You're always lying. Her voice broke into sobs again, and I stood up, trying to reach her. But she stepped back, shaking her head. Don't touch me, she said through gritted teeth. You took my dad away from me. You took everything. Tears blurred my vision. I was trying to protect you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Protect me? She spat. You destroyed me. I didn't know what to say anymore. I just stood there, helpless, my heart shattering as I watched her crumble under the weight of her own pain. Then, in the smallest, coldest voice I'd ever heard her use, she said, You'll finally know what it's like to lose everything. I stared at her, unable to move. What do you mean by that? She looked up, her eyes hollow and dark. You'll see, she whispered. Then she whispered something so chilling, I couldn't breathe. You said, Section 10J Revenge Stories said, Section 10890 words. The truth about her father. Dad told me what you did, she said, her voice trembling. Those words hung in the air between us, slicing through whatever fragile piece was left. For a long moment, I couldn't move or speak. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My ears rang, my vision blurred, and my heart thudded painfully in my chest. What did he tell you, Chloe? I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. She wiped her face, angry tears streaking her cheeks. He told me you ruined his life, that you made him leave, that you pushed him away because you wanted to keep me all to yourself. My throat tightened. That's not true, I said quickly, maybe too quickly. He left on his own, Chloe. You were 6 years old. He wasn't well. Her jaw clenched. You're lying, she said. You're always lying. I took a step toward her, but she flinched back as if my touch might burn her. It broke something inside me. Sweetheart, please, I said softly. You don't know everything. You don't know what he was like back then. Her eyes were sharp, defiant. I know enough. He said you tried to turn me against him. That you told everyone he was dangerous. That he couldn't be trusted. I closed my eyes, swallowing hard. He was dangerous, I whispered. She shook her head. You're just saying that because you hate him. You made me think he didn't care about me, but he did. He told me how he tried to see me, but you wouldn't let him. He's lying, I said, my voice rising now. He's been lying to you for years. He's manipulating you, Chloe. He always has. Stop calling him a liar, she screamed, her voice breaking. You can't stand the idea that I might love him too, her words sliced deep. Of course you can love him, I said, my voice shaking. But you have to understand. He's not the man you think he is. He's sick, Chloe. He hurt people. He hurt me. She froze, her face softening just for a second. What do you mean? I hesitated. How could I tell her? How could I explain the nights I hid bruises under my sleeves? The nights I stayed awake listening for the sound of his keys in the lock, praying he wouldn't come home drunk again. Your father had problems, I said carefully. He was drinking a lot back then, using things he shouldn't have. He wasn't himself. And when he left, it wasn't because I made him, it was because he couldn't stay. He didn't want to face what he'd done. Chloe shook her head, stepping back as if I were trying to trick her. No. He said you're the one who hurt him. That you lied to the police, said he hit you so he'd have to leave. My heart stopped. He told you that? She nodded, tears spilling again. He said you ruined his life and took everything from him. His house, his daughter, his reputation. I felt my legs weaken. I sank onto the couch, my head spinning. Oh God, I whispered. He's poisoning you. Chloe's hands balled into fists. No, you poisoned me. You poisoned my mind. You made me hate my own dad. Her voice cracked, and for a second, her anger dissolved into pain, raw, trembling pain. Do you know what it feels like to grow up thinking someone didn't love you? To think they forgot you existed? She cried. All those birthdays, all those Father's Days, I thought he didn't care. And now I find out you made that happen. Her words stabbed deeper than she could know. I was trying to protect you, I said again, my own tears blurring my vision. He wasn't safe, Chloe. He wasn't safe for either of us. Then why would he still talk to me? Why would he want to see me if he didn't care? She demanded. Because he wants control, I said firmly. That's all he's ever wanted. You're just another way for him to hurt me. She stared at me for a long, painful silence. Then, quietly, she said, he told me you'd say that. He said you'd make him sound crazy. That's how you manipulate people. I shook my head, feeling something break inside me. Oh, baby. He's turning you against me. She sniffled, her anger dimming, confusion flickering across her face. He wouldn't lie to me. I hesitated, then made a decision. Come with me, I said softly. Where? She asked, her voice wary. To my room, I said. There's something I need to show you. She followed me reluctantly down the hall. My hands trembled as I reached into the top drawer of my dresser and pulled out a small, faded envelope yellowed from time, sealed and worn at the edges. I'd kept it hidden for years, buried under clothes, unable to face it. What's that? She asked. It's from your father, I said quietly. He left it the day he walked out. Her eyes widened. You kept it? I nodded. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. She looked skeptical. Why are you showing me this now? Because you deserve the truth, I said. Not his version. The real one. I handed her the letter. Her fingers shook as she opened it. The paper crackled softly, and I watched her eyes move across the words, her lips trembling as she read. I'd read that letter 100 times over the years. I knew exactly what it said. How he admitted he couldn't stop drinking. How he confessed to stealing from me. To cheating. To things worse than that. How he said he was ashamed. That he didn't want to drag us down with him. When she reached the end, her face went pale. Her hands dropped to her sides, the letter fluttering to the floor. "He wrote that," she whispered. "Yes," I said softly. "That's the truth, Chloe, not the version he's feeding you." She shook her head weakly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No," he said, "you made this all up. That you'd do anything to keep me from him." "I didn't make it up," I said, kneeling beside her. "I swear to you, Chloe. I never wanted to take him away from you. I just wanted to keep you safe." She sank onto the bed, her face buried in her hands. Her sobs came hard and broken. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know." I placed a trembling hand on her shoulder, feeling her shake beneath my touch. For the first time in weeks, there was no anger between us, just heartbreak. And for one brief, fragile moment, I thought maybe we could come back from this, that maybe the truth would finally set her free. But when I told her the real reason he left, everything in her face changed. "You said, Section 11, J Revenge Stories said, Section 1, 1850 words. The hidden letter." I went to my room and brought her the letter he left when he abandoned us. It had sat in that drawer for 15 years unopened for the first few, then read in secret over and over until I knew every word by heart. I used to think I kept it because I couldn't let go of the past, but now I realized I'd been holding on to it for her for this exact moment when the truth would matter more than anything else. Chloe's hands shook as she took the envelope from me. She looked uncertain, as though she half expected me to trick her, to hand her another lie wrapped in my guilt. I didn't blame her for the hesitation. After all, she'd been living in a world built on half-truths and misunderstandings, and I was the one who created it by keeping this secret buried for so long. "Go ahead," I whispered. "Read it." She tore the top open slowly. The paper inside was worn and creased from all the times I'd unfolded it over the years. As her eyes moved down the page, I watched her expression shift from confusion to shock, and finally to heartbreak. The letter was short, but every word cut deep. "Elaine, I can't do this anymore. I'm not the man you married. I can't face what I've become, and I can't keep pretending I can fix it. I'm ashamed of what I've done to you and Chloe. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm taking the money from your purse, but it's not because I want to hurt you. I just need to get away. I've been lying, drinking, stealing. I've lost everything that mattered. Tell Chloe I love her, but don't let her grow up like me, please." Her hands trembled as she finished reading, and for a long moment, she just stared at the paper. Her lips parted but silent. Her eyes glistened with tears that hadn't yet fallen. "Is this real?" she finally whispered. I nodded slowly. "It's real. I found it the day he left. He never came back." She looked down again, tracing the shaky handwriting with her fingertip. He said you lied. That you made it all up." "I know he did," I said softly. "He's been rewriting the story for years, Chloe. Because that's what people like him do, they twist the truth until they can live with it. I didn't want you to grow up hating him, but I also couldn't let you believe he was someone he wasn't." Her shoulders slumped. "Why didn't you show me this before?" "Because you were little," I said, my throat tightening. "You wouldn't have understood. And when you got older, I thought maybe it didn't matter anymore. I thought maybe he'd stay gone, but I was wrong. He found a way back in." She looked up at me then, her face a mix of anger and grief. "He told me he loved me, Mom. He told me he wanted to see me. I believed him." "I know," I said, sitting beside her. "And I don't blame you for that. You wanted your dad. Every child does. You just didn't know the whole truth." Her tears finally spilled over, falling onto the letter. "I was so angry at you," she said through sobs. "I thought you ruined everything." "I know you did," I whispered, wrapping an arm around her. "And I don't blame you for that either. I should have told you the truth a long time ago. I just wanted to protect you from his darkness." She leaned into me then, her body trembling, her sobs breaking against my shoulder. I held her tight, stroking her hair the way I used to when she was little. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I felt like I had my daughter back, even if just for that moment. We stayed like that for a long time, The house was silent except for the sound of her crying and the ticking of the clock on the wall. I wanted to believe that everything could be fixed now, that the truth would be enough to mend what had broken between us. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were red, her face pale. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "We'll take it one day at a time. We can go to therapy together, talk about this, heal from it. We'll rebuild, I promise." She nodded faintly, though she didn't seem entirely convinced. Her gaze dropped back to the letter, as if she was trying to absorb every word, to make sense of the years of anger and betrayal that had shaped her. "You still love him," she said quietly after a moment. I hesitated before answering. "A part of me always will," I admitted. "Not the man he became, but the man I thought he was. He was your father. He gave me you. I can't hate him completely for that." Chloe looked down again, her fingers tightening around the paper. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke next. "I hate him for making me hate you." That broke me. I pulled her close again, tears filling my eyes. "You didn't know, honey. You were just trying to make sense of everything. But now you do. And we can start over. We'll be okay." She nodded against my shoulder, her voice muffled. "I'm so sorry, Mom." I kissed her forehead. "It's okay. I forgive you." For a brief, beautiful moment, I felt peace settle over us. The truth had finally surfaced. The lies, the resentment, the pain, they were out in the open now. I truly believed we could start again. But as we sat there, the letter resting between us like a fragile truce, I didn't notice the flicker of something in her eyes, something that looked like guilt and panic twisting together. She stood abruptly. "I need some air," she said. I nodded, assuming she needed a moment to process everything. "Take your time, sweetheart." She slipped out of the room quietly. I sat there, staring at the letter, feeling a cautious hope blooming in my chest. Maybe, finally, we were okay. Maybe she'd come back from the edge. I didn't know it yet, but the worst was still ahead of us. And for a moment, I thought I could finally breathe again until I saw what she did next. "You said, Section 12J Revenge Stories said, Section 12860 words. The final attempt that night, I caught Chloe in the kitchen with a handful of pills. The house had fallen into a heavy, deceptive quiet after our conversation. I thought she'd gone to her room to process everything, to cry it out, maybe even to rest. I stayed in my bedroom, rereading her father's letter over and over, feeling a mix of exhaustion and fragile relief. For the first time in weeks, I believed we'd finally reached each other. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. It must have been around midnight when I heard a faint noise, metal clinking against glass, followed by the sound of a cabinet door creaking open. At first, I thought it was just the house settling. Then another sound came, this time unmistakable, a muffled sob. My body went cold. I got out of bed and crept toward the noise, each step slow, careful. The light spilling from the kitchen doorway was dim, golden, and flickering from the old bulb above the stove. And there she was, Chloe, standing by the counter, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling. A bottle of pills sat open beside her, the same kind I'd found missing before. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. "Chloe?" I said softly. She startled, spinning around, the pills scattering across the tile like tiny white beads. "Mom," she gasped, her voice breaking. "What are you doing?" I asked, my throat tight. She shook her head, her breathing shallow. "I can't." She started, but her voice cracked. "I can't live with this anymore." I stepped forward cautiously, my hands out in front of me. "Chloe, listen to me. We can fix this. We're already fixing it." "No, we're not," she cried. "You don't understand," I tried to. She cut herself off, pressing her shaking hands against her face. "I tried to hurt you, Mom. And I can't live with that. I can't live with what I did." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees weaken, but I forced myself to stay steady. "Sweetheart, it's okay," I said, my voice trembling. "You made a mistake. You were hurting. I forgive you, Chloe. I already forgave you. She shook her head violently. No, you don't. You shouldn't. Her sobs came harder now, racking her whole body. You were right about him, about Dad. I hate him for what he did, but I hate myself more for believing him. For everything I did to you. I moved closer, slowly, afraid any sudden movement would send her over the edge. Chloe, put the pills down, please. She looked at the scattered tablets on the floor, then back at me, her eyes wide with panic. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I didn't mean to. I wanted you to understand how much I was hurting. I wanted you to feel what I felt when I thought you'd betrayed me. My chest ached. And I do understand, I whispered. I understand completely now. But this isn't the way, Chloe. You don't have to. Punish yourself. She sank to her knees, gathering the pills in her shaking hands, tears dripping onto the floor. I'm sorry. She kept repeating. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I rushed forward, dropping beside her, grabbing her wrists gently. Listen to me, I said firmly, meeting her eyes. We can fix this. We can get help. I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone. Her lips quivered. I can't fix what I did. Yes, you can, I said. You already started. You told me the truth. That's how healing begins. She looked up at me, her eyes full of terror and shame. But I already took some. The world seemed to tilt. What? I took some earlier, she whispered. I thought maybe it would make it easier to sleep, to stop thinking, but I think I took too many. My heart lurched. Oh my God. I grabbed the bottle and saw that it was half empty. My hands went cold. Chloe. How many? She shook her head helplessly. I don't know. I didn't waste another second. I helped her to her feet, my hands trembling as I guided her toward the door. We're going to the hospital. Right now. She was weak, her steps faltering. I'm sorry, she murmured again. Please don't hate me. I could never hate you, I said, tears streaming down my face. You're my baby. We're going to get through this. Just hold on. I half carried her to the car, fumbling with my keys, praying under my breath. The drive to the hospital was a blur, red lights, empty streets, the hum of the engine blending with the sound of her ragged breathing. I kept glancing at her slumped figure beside me, whispering, Stay with me, baby. Please. Stay with me. When we reached the emergency room, I shouted for help. The nurses rushed forward, taking her from my arms. I stood there, numb, as they wheeled her through the swinging doors, their voices urgent and clinical. Possible overdose, stable pulse, prepare, gastric lavage. The sound of those words made me sick. My legs gave out, and I sank into one of the waiting room chairs, my body shaking. The walls felt too bright, too sterile, too quiet. A nurse asked me questions I barely registered. What did she take? How long ago? How many? I could only answer in fragments. Minutes felt like hours. Time stopped meaning anything. When a doctor finally came out, his expression was calm but serious. She's stable for now, he said. We managed to get most of it out of her system. She's very lucky you brought her in when you did. Lucky. The word didn't feel right. It felt hollow. I followed him to her room. She looked small, fragile, pale against the white sheets, her eyes closed. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, beeping softly. I took her hand in mine and pressed it to my lips. I'm here, sweetheart, I whispered. You're safe. I sat there for hours, holding her hand, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. I thought about everything that had led us here, all the fights, all the secrets, all the pain neither of us knew how to share. I realized then that love isn't always enough, not when silence fills the spaces where truth should have been. When she finally stirred, her eyelids fluttering open, her gaze met mine. Her voice was weak but clear. Mom? I'm here, I said softly, gripping her hand tighter. A tear rolled down her cheek. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted you to understand me. When she finally opened her eyes, what she said broke me completely. You said, Section 13, J. Revenge Stories said, Section 13880 words. Her apology. Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted you to understand me. Her voice was barely above a whisper, raw and trembling, but those words hit me harder than anything else had. I had been sitting beside her hospital bed for hours, staring at her pale face, her fragile frame, the IV line snaking from her hand. I had imagined this moment over and over while waiting in the sterile, humming quiet of the room, but hearing it out loud was like a knife twisting in my chest. Tears welled in my eyes. I squeezed her hand gently, afraid that if I held too tight, she might break. I do understand now, Chloe, I said softly. More than you think. I should have seen how much you were hurting, but I didn't. I was so busy trying to hold everything together that I forgot how to just listen. She blinked slowly, her lips quivering. I thought you didn't care, she whispered. When Dad started messaging me, he made me feel like he was the only one who really understood. I didn't even know it was him at first. He told me things that sounded real, things you'd said. Things from before I was even born. I thought he was the good guy and you were the reason he left. I nodded, wiping my eyes. I know. He wanted you to believe that. He's been manipulating people his whole life, Chloe. You just didn't know it yet. She looked down, her fingers twitching slightly in mine. When I found out the truth, I felt so stupid. I thought I could fix it by punishing you, by making you feel how I felt. I wanted to scare you, not... Her voice broke. I didn't mean for it to go that far. My throat ached. I know you didn't. I whispered. You were in pain. I should have told you everything sooner. I should have trusted you with the truth. She started to cry again. Quiet. Shaking sobs that tore through the stillness of the room. I leaned closer, brushing the hair away from her damp cheeks. Shh, it's okay, I said gently. We're here now. We're safe. We can start over. She shook her head weakly. You shouldn't forgive me, not after what I did. Forgiving you isn't a choice, Chloe, I said. It's instinct. You're my daughter. I'll always forgive. You. That made her cry harder. You're too good, she choked out. You shouldn't still love me after everything. Love doesn't stop, I said. It bends, it breaks, it bleeds, but it doesn't stop. We stayed like that for a long time. Her crying softly. Me holding her hand, both of us finally saying the things we'd needed to say for years. Every beep from the heart monitor felt like a reminder that we still had time. That we still had a chance. A nurse came in quietly to check her vitals, smiling softly when she saw us. She's doing better, the nurse said. You got her here just in time. Thank you, I whispered. And when she left, I turned back to Chloe. You're going to be okay. We'll get you help. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. You don't have to carry all this alone anymore. Chloe nodded weakly, exhaustion washing over her features. I want to try, she murmured. I don't want to be like him, Mom. I don't want to hurt people the way he did. I brushed her hand gently. You're not like him. You never were. You're kind, and you care too deeply. That's what hurt you, but it's also what will heal you. A small, trembling smile crossed her lips. Do you really think I can get better? I know you can, I said firmly. And I'll be right here with you, every step of the way. She nodded, her eyes fluttering shut for a moment. I wish I could undo everything, she whispered. I wish I could take it all back. I shook my head. We can't go back, sweetheart, but we can go forward. That's what matters. For the first time in what felt like years, I saw peace in her face. The tension that had lived in her features for months seemed to ease, replaced by a kind of quiet resignation, a fragile hope. Over the next few days, the doctors kept her for observation. I stayed in that hospital chair, sleeping upright, watching her breathe. Each time her eyes opened, I was there. She started talking more about school, her friends, her fears, and her guilt. I listened this time. Really listened. No judgment, no interruptions. just understanding. When she was finally discharged, she held onto my arm as we walked out of the hospital together. She looked fragile, but there was something new in her eyes, a softness, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. At home, things were different. The air felt lighter, calmer. I cleaned out the medicine cabinet, threw away every last pill, and replaced it with vitamins and herbal tea. Chloe started seeing a therapist twice a week. Sometimes, I'd hear her crying after sessions, but she always came to me afterward. We'd sit at the kitchen table, and she'd tell me everything. We began healing together. It wasn't easy. There were still nights where she woke up crying, and days when the weight of guilt seemed to crush her, but we were trying. And that was enough. One morning, a few weeks after she came home, I walked into the kitchen to find her standing by the counter. The air was warm with the familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee. For a split second, my body froze, old fear rising in my chest. She noticed. "Don't worry," she said quickly, giving me a small, sad smile. "It's just coffee. I wanted to make it for us, the right way this time." I hesitated, my heart racing, then nodded. "Okay." She handed me a mug. Her hands were steady now. The coffee smelled perfect, rich and sweet, no bitterness. We sat together at the table in silence. She looked at me, her eyes clear for once. "I'm so sorry for everything, Mom," she said. I smiled faintly. "I know, sweetheart. And I forgive you." She took a deep breath and smiled back, tentative but real. "Maybe this time the coffee will actually taste good." I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me, not fear this time, but something softer, steadier. And then, one morning, she made me coffee again. "You said, Section 14J Revenge," Stories said, Section 14880 words, the coffee that told the truth. This time, the coffee tasted just right, warm, sweet, and full of sincerity. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the morning light spill through the window, catching the glimmer of steam rising from our mugs. The smell was different, too comforting, rich, without the strange bitterness that had haunted me before. For the first time in months, my hands didn't shake as I took that first sip. It was just coffee. Simple, safe, honest. Chloe sat across from me, her fingers wrapped around her cup, her gaze steady but cautious, as though she was still testing the waters of our fragile peace. The silence between us was no longer heavy or sharp. It was soft now, filled with unspoken understanding. "I tried a new blend," she said shyly after a moment. "The lady at the store said it has caramel notes. I thought you might like it." I smiled, the corners of my mouth trembling slightly. "You were right, it's perfect." She let out a small laugh, an honest one, not the hollow sound I'd heard for so long. "I was scared to even offer it to you," she admitted. "I didn't know if you'd want to take anything from me again." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "I was scared too," I said quietly. "But I want to move past that, Chloe. I don't want us to live in fear anymore." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I don't either." For a while, we just sat there, drinking our coffee in peace. It felt like reclaiming something that had been stolen from us, something small, but sacred. The past few weeks hadn't been easy. Therapy was hard for both of us. The counselors dug deep, asking questions that reopened old wounds, but we faced them together. Chloe had started journaling again, something she used to love before everything fell apart. Sometimes she'd leave pages on the counter for me, to read little glimpses into her thoughts, her regrets, her healing. She was trying, and so was I. There were still moments when I caught her looking at me a certain way, moments filled with guilt that hadn't yet faded, but now, instead of pulling away, she talked about it. She told me when she was scared, when the darkness tried to creep back in. And I told her about my own fears too. How I'd felt like I'd failed her, how I'd spent so many nights hating myself for not seeing her pain sooner. That morning, though, as we shared coffee, I felt something different. Not the desperation of trying to fix what was broken, but the quiet strength of rebuilding, piece by fragile piece. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked suddenly, her voice tentative. "Your father?" I asked. She nodded. Yes, I said. Sometimes. What do you feel when you do? I took a long sip of coffee, choosing my words carefully. Sadness, mostly. Not for him for what could have been. For the family we might have had if things had been different. But I don't hate him anymore. I let that go a long time ago. She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can forgive him. That's okay, I said. Forgiveness takes time. You don't owe it to him. You only owe it to yourself to stop letting him control how you feel. She looked up, her eyes thoughtful. I think I'm starting to understand that. We talked for a while longer about small things, about how she wanted to apply to art school next year, about how she'd been sketching again. I hadn't seen her this animated in years. The way her hands moved as she spoke, the spark in her eyes, it was like watching the girl she used to be come back to life, one layer at a time. When our mugs were empty, I stood to refill them. Same blend? I asked. She smiled. Please. I poured us both another cup, my movements calm and easy now. No hesitation. No second guessing. When I turned around, she was looking at me not with suspicion or guilt, but with affection. It had been so long since I'd seen that look, I almost didn't recognize it. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For not giving up on me. I swallowed hard, setting the mugs down. Never, I said. You're my daughter, Chloe. There was never a version of this world where I would have stopped loving you. She smiled faintly, tears brimming in her eyes. I don't deserve you. You do, I said. And you're proving it every day. She reached out and took my hand, squeezing it. I'm going to be better, Mom, I promise. I know you are. We sat there in silence again. But this time, it was peaceful. The clock ticked softly on the wall, and the sun climbed higher, washing the kitchen in golden light. The warmth from my mug seeped through my palms, grounding me in the present. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel fear or pain. I felt gratitude. For survival. For second chances. For love that refused to die, no matter how much it had been tested. Chloe took another sip and smiled. You were right. You know, she said. About what? I asked. About coffee, she said with a small laugh. It's all about balance. Too bitter, and it's hard to swallow. Too sweet, and it doesn't taste real. I smiled, understanding more than she knew. Exactly, I said. Just like life. She nodded, her eyes shining in the morning light. I think I finally get it now. We both sat back, sipping our coffee, surrounded by quiet. There was no dramatic ending, no grand revelation, just two people who had walked through something dark and somehow found their way back to the light. I looked at her, my heart full, and realized that the coffee she'd made this time wasn't just a drink. It was a symbol, a promise that we were starting over, stronger than before. The bitterness was gone not just from the coffee but from our hearts. That taste, that morning, told me everything I needed to know. Our story didn't end in poison, it ended in healing.